everybody. Welcome back up to the Vinyl Attic. We're here on our countdown of the albums, count up of the 100 albums that matter. Now, I want to be clear. These are the 100 albums that matter according to me. There's some people out there that say, who is this guy who is telling us what matters and what doesn't? It's just me. This is YouTube, people. There's lots of people who have opinions, so frickin' take a chill pill, douchebag. These are the 100 albums that I think matter. Randall Blazak, PhD, former record store employee, and bon vivant. Okay? Let's just get that out of the way. I don't need to be trolled anymore. Okay, anyway. We're at number 45. We're going through the 100 albums that are kind of, out of the mainstream, but are really great things to have in your collection. And this is another personal favorite of mine. I'm so excited. 1979's debut album by the B-52's from Athens, Georgia. There it is. Here's my copy, autographed by the band. We'll talk about that in a second. This is such a cool record with such a great story behind it. The B-52's were just a bunch of crazy kids in Athens, Georgia that met up and were jamming at Chinese restaurants and house parties in Athens, Georgia. And it was a time when there were sort of couple big giant trends happening. If we think of the late 1970s, first of all, there's disco. Everything is disco, and there's this incredibly sterile dance music. Starts off really vibrant and from the underground, but by the late 1970s is just like dreck. There's also like the arena rock stuff that's happening, the just kind of giant stadium rock that's happening, Kiss and Journey and all that stuff. And then punk is happening, and punk is this sort of underground rebellion against ABBA, against Saturday Night Fever, against kind of whatever's happening in the world. But punk is a little bit scary. Punk, if you think about the Sex Pistols and some of the hardcore in LA, it was pretty aggressive and pretty mean, and it wasn't really a lot of fun. So these art students are kind of getting into this dress up and retro kitsch, shopping at thrift stores, doing their hair crazy, thinking about the 60s, and just trying to make fun music that you can dance to that's not disco and it's not scary like punk or Van Halen or, anything else that was happening at the time. And Athens, which had a really great art school at the University of Georgia, had a really cool scene that produced a million great bands, including R.E.M. being the most famous, of course, kind of came out of that underground scene. The B-52's, they weren't the most accomplished musicians in the world. They weren't Yes or prog rock. They were Kate and Cindy, who did these fun vocals and did a little bit of bashing on the keyboards and the tambourines. Ricky Wilson, who is on guitar, often played the guitar with only 4 strings on it. Keith on drums, and then this kind of strange spoken word poet guy, Fred Schneider. And this just weird music. And they got the attention of Danny Beard at DB Records out of Atlanta. Old friend of mine, Danny Beard, still around. You can find him at Wax and Vax. And recorded a single called Rock Lobster in 1978. Recorded in Stone Mountain Studios, just off of Memorial Drive, just down the street from where I used to live. And this single, Rock Lobster, was like the antidote to all the heaviness that was happening in the late 70s and all the, just the posturing between the rock world and the disco world and the punk world. There was this joyous sound. Joy. We're talking a lot about joy right now, coming out of all the negativity. This joyous sound. Oh, there's a parallel here. This joyous sound of this really crazy record, Rock Lobster. It was kind of retro-y and very lo-fi. And the single sold thousands of copies and got the attention of music makers around the world, including they were playing in New York at Danceteria and playing in London. And this, I remember buying this single, which is Lost to the Wind, at my local record store, being so excited. And the joy of this record was, it wasn't like anything else. But B, and this is the important thing about the B-52's, is the B, it was sort of the misfits of the world. For the kids that didn't fit into one clique or the other, that weren't in with the jocks or the stoners, that were with their Rush t-shirts and getting high to Led Zeppelin. There were a bunch of us that just didn't fit in with the aggro stuff that was happening over here or the trendy stuff that was happening over here. The B-52's, it was like Jesus. It was kind of like Jesus shows up and says, hey, we've got something for you, you weird kids, misfits, kids that love music and love to dance but aren't a part of that, here's this little record. So shortly after that, because of the popularity of that single, Rock Lobster, they got signed by Chris Blackwell of Island Records, who signed him into Warner Brothers, the United States, and Island, and the rest of the world, and took him down to Compass Point in the Bahamas to record this album, and basically really tried to capture the live sound. It wasn't super produced. It was just them, 4 strings on a guitar, and made this record of all these weird little songs like Hot Lava and Planet Claire, and a cover of Downtown, the great Petula Clark from the 60s song. And it got some attention. It got some, in the middle of all this weird stuff. It comes out in July 1979, July 6, 1979, and gets the attention of a lot of people who are looking for something new. You know, the 70s are about over. What are the 80s going to sound like? The album makes it all the way up to number 59 on the Billboard album chart, and the single got almost as high as that, and created this sort of opening of this great music that was there, and is really popular with the Misfits. And one of the places that this record makes an impact, and I'm just so happy that this is the part of this story, is with a little musician by the name of John Lennon. John Lennon had retired from the music business, and we've talked about John Lennon leaving after Walls and Bridges on this channel. The summer of 1980, decides he wants to kind of connect with his sea roots as a Liverpudlian, and gets on the sailboat with one other guy and sails to Bermuda. He hasn't made music since 1974. He's kind of sick of the music business, and he goes through these storms, and he's almost thrown overboard, and he's just like John Lennon against the waves singing sea shanties, and he finally pulls into Bermuda, and they settle down, and then they go to a club. And in the club, he hears the new music that's playing, which is now sort of being called New Wave. Like, New Wave was a sort of space between punk rock and commercial music. And here's Rock Lobster. And the thing that he hears in Rock Lobster is Yoko Ono. That he hears... that a lot of the screaming and yelping that Kate and Cindy do sounds a lot like those Yoko Ono records from 10 years earlier. Sounds a lot of the wailing and squealing, especially the end part of Rock Lobster where it's all the fish chasing each other. It's straight up Yoko Ono. And he hears it and he's like, they get it. Finally people get Yoko. Finally, after all the shit talk that she's had, people get the musicality of Yoko Ono. And he's so inspired that he sits down on the beach and starts writing songs. He writes 25 songs there in Bermuda, some of which end up on the Double Fantasy album. In fact, the flower that the album is named after, he sees at the Bermuda Botanical Garden, and he's reinvigorated because of the B-52's Rock Lobster single to get back into the music, which was great because that brought him back to us. Unfortunately, it led to his murder, but at least we got this sort of new, refreshed John because of Rock Lobster. Now, the reason I have this signed is because their follow-up album, which came out the next spring, Wild Planet, you know, by that time they were starting to become somewhat of a phenomena, especially among misfit kids. And the spring of 1980, they did it in-store at Oz Records on Memorial Drive in Stone Mountain. And it was in the middle of a school day, and all of us punk new wave kids skipped school that day to go to Oz Records to get them to autograph the records, including Ricky, the guitarist who died in 1985 of age-related complex. I'm so glad I got to meet him. Fred did not sign that because Fred, according to the band, got lost on his way to Stone Mountain. So we didn't meet him on that day. Fred Schneider and I are now Facebook friends, and I mentioned this story to him. He's like, I don't remember anything about that. I'm like, Fred, you didn't make it to Oz Records that day. You owe me an autograph. One of the beautiful things about this record is it started kind of an aesthetic. You know, there was sort of a punk look and a new wave look and a heavy metal look and a stoner look. This whole thing about kind of modern bohemians going into the thrift stores. And I'll tell you, in 1980, when this record was out, I started driving from Stone Mountain, Georgia to Athens, Georgia, and going to places like the Potter's House, where it was $1 for a bag of clothes. You would just climb into these massive piles of clothes, mostly polyester, dig through them, fill up a grocery store bag for $1, and created a whole new style that is now very common. You know, going to Goodwill and finding retro clothes and, you know, looking for stuff that's old, even new stuff being sold to look old, to look retro. You know, a lot of that starts with the B-52's and this sort of thrift store chic that they started with Rock Lobster way back when. It still sounds completely fresh. It still sounds very raw in the sense that it was just these 5 crazy kids making this goofy music that is still with us. Rock Lobster still sounds great. 52 Girls, Lava, Planet Claire, Dance This Mess Around, something about Limburger. Dance This Mess Around. I mean, this is crazy. It's crazy music, and it's joyous. And we're in a moment now where joy is back, and it's okay to listen to music that is silly and makes you laugh in a kind of funny way. But let's laugh. Let's laugh like that again. I really, really love this record. All right, I just wanted to give this record a quick review. Encourage you to go out and get it on vinyl. One of the things I wanted to point out is that the Rock Lobster and the B-side, which is 52 Girls, that were recorded in Stone Mountain Studio, were re-recorded for this album at Compass Point with Chris Blackwell from Island Records. So if you can find the original single, it sounds a little bit different. It's a great collector's item. I'd lost mine in college. I don't know where it went, and I've missed it ever since. But it literally changed the world. Rock Lobster changed the world. Rock Lobster brought John Lennon back to us. Rock Lobster got us thrift shopping like Macklemore, and Rock Lobster puts a smile on everybody's face whoever listens to it. So let's dance this mess around. Okay, there you go. Next week, speaking of dance music, we're going to get into a really great record I don't think enough people talk about. We're going to talk about Janet Jackson, Rhythm Nation, 1814 Rhythm Nation. We need to discuss this album in depth. So that's coming up next on our 100 albums that I think should be in your collection, just me. Otherwise, you know what I'm going to say. The B-52's matter. They still matter. They're still going strong. They're still out there playing Love Shack on all their hits. This album matters. It matters to me, near and dear to my heart, and you matter. So let's talk about it.